This is the story of how the United States is following the same path as Rome, Spain, and Britain, mounting debt, lost manufacturing, and military overextension, while China methodically builds the infrastructure for a new world order. America's national debt just crossed $38 trillion and grows by $6 billion daily, while China has become the world's largest manufacturer, largest creditor nation, and largest infrastructure builder. By the numbers, the shift is already underway, and the question isn't whether America is in decline, but whether that decline can be reversed. $38.4 trillion. That's what the United States owes right now, which works out to $284,914 for every American household. Debt to GDP sits between 98 and 100%, and the Congressional Budget Office projects that ratio climbing to 156% by 2055. What makes this truly dangerous isn't just the size of the debt, but what we're paying to service it. Fiscal year 2024 saw the federal government hand over $1.13 trillion in interest payments alone, an 83% jump since 2022. That number now exceeds Medicare spending at $874 billion and national defense at $873.5 billion, which means we're spending more to service debt than to defend our borders or provide healthcare to seniors. The mathematics get worse with every refinancing cycle. Roughly $7 trillion needs refinancing, and every 1% increase in interest rates adds $70 billion to annual costs. Bond markets have noticed, pushing 10-year Treasury yields around 4.2% and 30-year bonds past 5%. Credit rating agencies responded the only way they could. S&P downgraded America to AA+ in 2011. Fitch followed in August 2023, and Moody's completed the sweep in May 2025 with a citation for rising debt, interest costs, and failure to address the fiscal trajectory. For the first time in over a century, no major agency gives the United States a perfect credit rating. History offers uncomfortable parallels. Rome debased its currency from 95% silver content down to 2% over 3 centuries, while military spending consumed 60 to 80% of the imperial budget. Spain under Philip II defaulted 4 separate times. Britain pushed debt to 238% of GDP by 1946, which forced the pound to surrender reserve currency status to the dollar. Debt accumulation, rising interest costs, eventual collapse, the pattern repeats. Debt tells only half the story because what really separates declining empires from rising ones is productive capacity, the ability to actually make things. On this measure, America has been in freefall for decades. China's entry into the World Trade Organization in December 2001 triggered a manufacturing exodus that cost America 6 million jobs between 2000 and 2010. Computer and electronics shed 786,000 positions, a 43% collapse. Apparel manufacturing lost 81% of its workforce between 1979 and 2019. 70,000 manufacturing plants closed their doors between 1998 and 2019. China's manufacturing output exploded during this same period. Back in 2004, America commanded 22.3% of global manufacturing output, while China controlled 8.7%. 20 years later, those numbers flipped completely. China now cranks out $4.66 trillion in manufactured goods, capturing 27.7% of global output, while America produces $2.91 trillion at 17.3%. Chinese manufacturing now exceeds the combined production of the United States, Japan, and Germany. A UN projection shows China reaching 45% of global industrial production by 2030, with Western nations tumbling to just 11%. Detroit's collapse shows the human cost. Manufacturing employment dropped 52.5% between 2000 and 2010. A quarter of the population fled the city, and unemployment peaked near 25% in 2009. 40% of Detroit's land sits vacant today, and the city filed for bankruptcy in 2013. Manufacturing jobs vanished, and wealth concentrated at the top. America's top 1% now control 30.5% of total household wealth, while the bottom 50% hold 2.5%. Zoom out to the top 10%, and you're looking at 67.2% of all wealth. An average of $8.1 million each compared to $60,000 for the bottom half. CEO compensation tells the divergent story in stark terms. Back in 1965, CEOs earned 21 times what their typical worker made. That ratio hit 384 to 1 by 2000. Today it stands at 290 to 1, with average CEO pay reaching $21.5 million. Since 1978, CEO compensation climbed 1,085%, while typical worker pay rose just 24%. The American dream collapsed somewhere along the way. 90% of children born in 1940 earned more than their parents, but for kids born in the 1980s, that figure dropped to 50%. Low-income American families now need 5 generations to reach median income, while Danish families need 2. Lost manufacturing created dependencies that run deeper than most people realize. China supplies 78% of smartphones sold in America, 79% of laptops, and 70% of lithium-ion batteries. The real vulnerabilities hide in critical materials, where China controls 60 to 70% of global rare earth mining and 85 to 90% of refining capacity. Everything from smartphones to fighter jets depends on these materials. Pharmaceuticals present an even scarier scenario. Direct U.S. reliance on Chinese active pharmaceutical ingredients hovers around 8%. But India supplies much of America's generic drugs and sources 70 to 80% of its APIs from China. Total vulnerability reaches approximately 47%. COVID-19 exposed these dependencies in brutal fashion. China nationalized medical supply production in February 2020. Surgical mask prices jumped sixfold, and America discovered it possessed only 1% of required PPE stockpiles. We'd outsourced our ability to protect ourselves during a pandemic. Dollar dominance has provided America with what economists call an exorbitant privilege for decades, the ability to borrow cheaply in our own currency. That advantage is eroding at a measurable pace. Foreign exchange reserves held in dollars dropped from 72% in 2001 to 57.8% by late 2024, a 14 percentage point decline over 23 years. Russia and China now settle 90% of their bilateral trade in yuan and rubles, roughly $240 billion in 2023. China's cross-border interbank payment system processed $24.5 trillion equivalent in 2024, up 42.6% year over year. Central banks worldwide accumulated over 1,000 tons of gold annually in 2022, 2023, and 2024, pushing gold's share of official reserves from under 10% in 2015 to over 23% in 2024. American policy has turned dangerously erratic just when stability matters most. Trump administration first-term tariffs pushed average rates on Chinese goods from 3 to 4% up to 19.3%. Hitting $380 billion in imports. Studies showed U.S. consumers absorbed the cost through higher prices, and retaliatory Chinese tariffs devastated American agriculture, with soybean exports to China collapsing 75% from $12.3 billion down to $3.1 billion. The second-term escalation produced worse results. April 2025 brought the Liberation Day announcement of baseline 10% tariffs on all imports, plus reciprocal tariffs ranging from 11 to 50% on specific countries, which triggered the largest two-day market decline in history. 10% vanished from the S&P 500. $6.6 trillion in market value evaporated. The volatility index spiked to 45.31, the highest reading since March 2020. Policy whiplash of this magnitude destroys the predictability businesses need for long-term planning and undermines confidence in American stability precisely when bond markets are already nervous about debt sustainability. China's approach stands in sharp contrast to American chaos, where America borrowed to consume, China saved to invest, and the numbers tell the story. China's gross savings rate stands at 43.4% of GDP, 3 times the U.S. rate of 14 to 17%. Chinese households sock away 46% of income compared to America's 3.6% personal savings rate. These savings finance investment rates of approximately 41% of GDP, double what the United States manages. Infrastructure spending in 2023 alone reached $2.4 trillion. Railway investment in 2024 totaled $117 billion. China's high-speed rail network now stretches 48,000 kilometers, the world's longest, with plans to extend to 60,000 kilometers by 2030. Research and development spending hit $500 billion in 2024. patent applications pour in at a rate of 1.8 million annually, 48% of the global total. Military budgets have climbed for 29 consecutive years, reaching an estimated $314 billion. China's most ambitious project operates on a global scale. President Xi Jinping's 2013 announcement launched the Belt and Road Initiative, which has committed over $1 trillion in infrastructure investment across 149 countries, representing 75% of global population. Engagement in 2024 reached a record $121.8 billion. Major projects span continents. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor totals $62 billion. Kenya's Mombasa-Nairobi Railway cost $3.8 billion. Indonesia's Jakarta-Bandung high-speed railway reached $7.3 billion. Greece's port of Piraeus absorbed €1 billion in Chinese investment and has become the largest Mediterranean container port, fifth largest in the EU. Critics label this debt trap diplomacy, but academic research complicates that narrative. Sri Lanka's Hambantota port serves as the most cited example, yet researchers found Sri Lanka proposed the project, not China, and Chinese loans comprised only 9% of Sri Lankan government debt. China has extended $240 billion in emergency rescue lending to struggling borrowers, which suggests a more complex picture. Strategic focus comes through clearly in the numbers. Mining investments reached a record $21.4 billion in 2024, securing access to critical minerals. China now controls 85 to 90% of global rare earth refining, 68 to 73% of cobalt refining, and 78% of EV battery cell manufacturing. Military comparisons reveal starkly different strategic postures. China operates one confirmed overseas military base in Djibouti, opened 2017, with approximately 4,000 service members deployed in or around Africa, including peacekeepers. America maintains approximately 750 bases in over 80 countries, with roughly 170,000 active duty troops deployed overseas. Post 9/11 war costs have reached $8 trillion through fiscal year 2022. Afghanistan alone consumed over $2 trillion across 20 years before the Taliban returned to power in August 2021. Chinese foreign policy rests on non-interference in internal affairs, principles written into China's constitution since 1978. Beijing maintained relationships with Sudan, Zimbabwe, Myanmar, and Venezuela regardless of their governance, an approach that contrasts sharply with U.S. interventions in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. Historian Paul Kennedy identified the pattern back in 1987 when he described how military expenses grow and reduce investment in economic growth, leading to what he called the downward spiral of slower growth. Heavier taxes, deepening domestic splits over spending priorities, and weakening capacity to bear the burdens of defense. America maintained roughly the same massive array of military obligations across the globe as decades prior, but its share of world GDP and manufacturing had shrunk dramatically. That observation hits harder today than when Kennedy wrote it. America carries record peacetime debt, has surrendered its manufacturing base to China, faces unprecedented inequality, depends on Chinese supply chains for critical goods, and maintains military commitments it can barely afford. China, meanwhile, builds infrastructure, accumulates gold, and signs partnership agreements across the developing world. Does this guarantee China's rise? Not necessarily. Population has fallen for 3 consecutive years, fertility sits at 1.09 births per woman, and projections show 40% of the population over 60 by 2050. Total economy debt ranges from 290 to 350% of GDP by various estimates. The trajectory remains undeniable regardless of China's challenges. Rome debased its currency and Spain defaulted on its debts. Britain exhausted itself in world wars and lost reserve currency status. America borrows to consume while China saves to invest. America loses manufacturing while China dominates it. America maintains 750 overseas bases while China builds ports and railways. The pattern repeats too consistently to ignore, and the question isn't whether empires decline, but whether this one can change course before the mathematics of debt and the loss of productive capacity make the outcome inevitable.